Okay, we're back in session. And I would like to introduce Resolution 90. Is there a second? Discussion.
You like a roll call? I'm just asking.
Mr. Hanky. Mrs. Fedler.
Yes.
Mr. Tall.
Yes.
Mr. Shaw.
Absolutely.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Nolan.
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Hahn.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Skelly.
Yes.
Mr. Hogan.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Clary.
Yes.
Mr. Wang.
Yes.
And Mr. Rozell.
Yes.
The resolution is adopted, 4,690 yes. Res- res- Resolution 91 by Supervisor Hanky, title authorize the county attorney to commence litigation regarding Executive Order 47.3 of the Governor of the State of New York concerning the county hiring of former employees of the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision.
Second.
Unanimous.
Discussion. Clary.
I would be, but I'm also concerned about what we just talked about and the cost to counties for different things, okay? And quite frankly, we just had a huge discussion about the big black hole and where we're going. And what we're doing is authorizing the county to go forward in litigation that we have no idea what the expense of that could be. If Dan could share with me how much that will cost the county.
Initially, there would be, application for an index number and an RGI, which is filing fees. That's within $500. Where expenses might get into things afterwards, right now it'd be mostly filing fees. So as opposed to paying, outside counsel, say $200-300 an hour, getting me for my salary. And so take that for what it's. Filing fees, yes. If there's anything else that's extraordinary, I would come back to the board and let them know ahead of time and get authorization.
Further comments?
Classified as strikers, and they're on the blacklist. And I think that that's even worse than what she did, because those individuals were fully willing to go back to work. It's just when they leave, cut up. So I think that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're having a roll call on this. Okay.
I believe there comes a time where we have to stand up and no longer live in fear of the state taking funding. And as long as we live in fear, they're going to take money from us every year. And at some point we have to fight. And I think this is the hill we need to stand on.
Mr. Hanky. Mrs. Fedler.
Yes.
Mr. Tall.
Yes.
Mr. Shaw.
Yeah.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Nolan.
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Hahn. Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Skelly. Mr. Hogan. Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Clary. Mr. Wang.
Yes.
Mr. Rozell. The resolution is adopted, 4,690 yes.
Budget comments. Joe O'Brien.
So I think that Mr. Nolan suggested we have an effort to streamline. I'd like to see a more educated effort to figure out what we have control over, what we can do, what our costs are, and projections in the future, where we're going. I think that while Al and Brian do a great job, I think we need to be educated on it. So when we're making decisions, we're making decisions cognizant of what the impact's going to be. And these unfunded mandates are one thing, but what happens if we have to look at cutting the budget someplace? And what's the impact? So I'd like to see a process put in place that helps educate all the supervisors what we have control over, where the costs are really coming from, and potentially are there areas that we can look at more streamlining. So I'd like to see that. And Jim?
I thank you, Supervisor O'Brien. My suggestion to do that is because we are facing increasing pressure, fiscal pressure, every year. So in talking with the department heads and talking among ourselves and so on, we may find areas where we can be more efficient and where we're forced to make hard decisions. It is better to make them, I think, at budget development time than to regret having to make these extra payments during the following fiscal year.
I just want to be clear about some of the things that I said today. I'm trying to stand up against the state bullying us. It doesn't mean that I don't believe in these programs that are very important. It's just I don't believe in the state shoving them down our throat and not funding them. I think all of them are good programs, but it gets to the point where are we going to be bankrupt before we stand up and fight? And that's what my position is.
I really think that Tammy's done a good job and is attacking this the right way, trying to get the state to give us more money. The problem is the state has a spending problem to begin with. They're putting it in the wrong place. Their policies take us in the wrong direction. It's not that they don't have enough money, it's where they're putting their priorities. And we can't somehow even get through to them to try to control that, and we've tried in the past. And I agree with Charlie, if it was on this, if they wanted to put that on state income tax so that every taxpayer knew why their income tax was higher, but instead they force it down to property tax, which is really a bad idea. But I think we'll find a way through this. I'm not totally optimistic. I'm glad that in our March finance meeting, everyone kind of listened and stepped to the plate, because lots of times it takes 3 times to tell you. And if I start telling you in August, you don't know till we've November. Well, this is a case where if there's any way we could curb any of this money going out the door would be nice. But the fact that the state fiscal year is through March, we've already got 3 months of our money out the door because the caps were already hit. So it's a whole different way of looking things than what we usually do, because we hit the one cap, I remember, or I'm sure Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was in October, and we didn't know right away. But if we already are in March and we're gonna hit the cap again in October, then you've got all those months again. And so that's a hard target to hit to know what that number is. So we've all got our work cut out for us, but we've got a good group down there, and I'm sure we'll figure it out. But it doesn't change the cost. We just need to know the cost before we can attack it.
Oh, if we look back, and Dan made reference to it back when, before I was on the board, is that the county did 0.00000% tax increases. Then all of a sudden it was hit with 25% one year, and I think 40% the next year increases. And as a result of that, there was a lot of cutbacks made. Number one, we went down to paving 5 miles of road a year, and it took us several years to get back into it. to get up where we were, but it also caused some other things. Instead of surfacing road and maintaining roads, we're going to have to reclaim roads, which is twice as expensive as really resurfacing roads. And I say that because while we need to take a look at it, if we don't keep up with maintenance, we don't keep up with it, it just gets more expensive in the future. So you solve a short-term problem with a long-term problem. And I think that we have to keep that in mind. Whatever we do, we have to make sure we're taking a cognizant effort, looking what the impact's going to be 5 or 10 years down the road.
Um, Thanks to networking and with Daryl and working with his wife and then Nicole Justice, we have a grand opening for the courthouse on April 6th from 3 to 5 due to the historic grant that came through. That grand hall and the stairway has all been restored, and plus also a fire alarm system has been put in the building. And so a couple years ago, Nicole came and talked to us, and they were amazing and very easy to work with. So if anybody has historic buildings that need a little bit of help, you should be calling the Arch and Pride of Ticonderoga. Great organization to work with.
Get a showing over there.
That would
pretty
be
good.
wonderful. That would be
Good.
great. Alex.
That's what she wanted.
That's delegation, you see, that's how that works. Mr. Shaw.
This is just a little bit of history referring to Salem Courthouse. As most of you all remember John LaPointe, who sat in the Putnam chair. He was the last serving supervisor that would meet once a year. The County Board of Supervisors met in that courthouse once a year. They were there, I think it was every other meeting, how they rotated it years ago. And then at the end, they had a 1-a-year meeting the Board of Supervisors did down there. And John LaPointe used to meet down there. So it hasn't been that long since the county participated in all this. And I just thought that's a nice little piece of trivia. And I don't want to drag this meeting out because the only thing I have left is more gloom and doom, and you don't want to hear it today.
I'm glad LaPointe was there for a meeting, not in one of the cages.
Maybe that's why.
it was there.
One more thing, Senator Jake Ashby is coming to Cambridge and Salem today, so if anybody wants to approach him personally, he's available in Salem from 2 to 3, and I don't know in Cambridge.
I believe they were set up this morning.
Oh, they were set up. Okay. So anyway, it's in Salem this afternoon. So,
Want more history about the Salem Courthouse?
No, I'll give you my own history here in a second. All right, my turn. Mr. Nolet mentioned the 8%. I recall a magnificent debate that when I was in favor of it, I believe Mr. Hogan was against it. And he said, if you get that, the first thing you do is spend it. I'd like to point out, if we had have got it, we spent it. Just now, that was
He's
spent. So
exactly
he was,
right.
you know, not for exactly the same philosophical reasons, but the same result, you know, occurred right there because of the state mandates. Secondly, I understand this is Maple Weekend. I have not received any notification of them doing anything or where they were doing it or anything was gonna happen, so I can't, usually I tell you, hey, let's run over to Campbell's and after this and eat pancakes, but, I don't have any idea where they're doing the tapping or who's coming or what's going on. Maybe it's Salem or something because Jake's there, but, they did not do a very good job of notifying this year, so I don't think most of us know about it. Finally, I got a sad note, and this actually probably relates to Fort Andrew a little bit. I lost a very good friend of mine, a guy named Les Saltzman, who was a fisheries biologist, came on in 1974 when I did. And we raised our kids together. He was in Fort Ann, I was in Queensbury, and Les was doing everything right. He was very conscientious, very careful guy. Had on his helmets and chaps and all kinds of stuff, cutting down a tree out back of his house, and the live tree apparently hooked a dead tree on the way down, and when he walked over to the live tree with his earmuffs, he didn't hear the other one coming, and it, you know, killed him instantly. So I lost a very good friend over there, and I guess it, you know, I'd like to say, you know, be prepared, be careful, but, you know, I do think what I'd rather say is, you know, tell people you love them when you do, and, you know, keep your day-to-day interactions positive, because you don't know what you're gonna have tomorrow. I expected to be working on our club with Les this weekend. I won't be. Anybody else? Mr. Shaw.
By order of the chairman of the Washington County Board of Supervisors, Robert Hinkie, I declare this meeting adjourned and stand adjourned until April 18th at 10 a.m. unless specially convened, in which case due and timely notice